Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Houston Element Podcast. My name is Missy, and I'm your host. And today, I have the lovely pleasure to invite local recording artist, Keifin.
Hello.
What's going on, man? How are you?
Doing wonderful today. You know, just another great day to be alive. Cannot complain.
I feel that, man. If that ain't the truth, man.
Yeah, you know. How are you today?
Living my best life, man. Living my best life, doing production, doing the thing, man. Being part of the 5%. Can't be mad.
And starting at AV too, which I got to see.
Yes, man. So for those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, certainly. So I go by Keifin. Primarily make music, generally hip hop, but been branching out into kind of some cool pop and punk space recently. Just experimenting with different sounds, but I do music. I like to do live shows when I get the chance to. I also play video games, and sometimes I stream them on Twitch when I get time to, which comes after, the day job, the music, everything else. But video games is the second love behind music. I try to stay busy with all those things, and just push that out there however I can.
Right on, man. So how long have you been making music?
I've been making music now for, let's see, I just turned 25. So that would put it about 7 years. So basically, since I started college, I've been making music about 7 years. Used to be part of a group, actually. So it was me and two other guys. I was best friends with them during school. And that lasted for about 2 or 3 years. Did a whole bunch of really cool shows, opening for Paul Wall, Lil Flip. Met a whole bunch of the Houston legends doing that. But, eventually life became life and we all went our separate ways. And I was the one that stuck with the music and did it individually. So I've been doing it solo for about 3 or 4 years now and still working on growing my own fan base, because we had a small fan base with the group, but obviously doing it myself, it's a new name, everything from the ground up starts differently. So about 3 years as Keifin, doing Keifin music and Keifin things, But yeah, I'd say about 3 years of doing the music stuff that I do. And then video games has been a forever thing. And just about a year ago, started streaming that every now and then.
Right on, man. So what is the inspiration behind your artist's name, your lyrics, and your style?
Well, the name, funny enough, a lot of people think it is a reference to smoking and whatnot, which you would think from seeing the name. But funny enough, my middle name is Kevin, and probably about 15 years old when I was just messing around and saying the name out loud differently, I was like, Kevin, Keifin. And I kind of just said Keifin and liked the way it sounded. I mean, this is before I knew about any reference it could have or what it would have meant. So funny enough, people think it's that way, but it's quite the opposite, where it's really just a play on my middle name that kind of stuck around with me. As far as influence on the style, I mean, the first music I listened to was around the era of like T.H.E, Ayaz, Akon, that kind of generation of crazy whenever pop was a big deal. That was when I started falling in love with music. But I'd say in terms of the hip hop and rap influence, it was Eminem first, which I know is basic, but it's the first one I really got to listen to whenever, I got to sneak my phone away. My parents actually wouldn't even let me listen to music with swear words in it. But one day I found Eminem Recovery, which is one of my favorite albums to this day. And I listened to it front to back and just loved it. And that kind of pushed me into checking out the Carter 3 by Lil Wayne. So Eminem and Wayne were the big driving factors into loving hip hop. But current day, past couple years, my favorite artists are people like MGK, Russ. There's another artist named Mike, which I don't know if you know him. He's probably got like about 1.5 million listeners on Spotify per month. So he's somewhere between underground and mainstream, but I kind of fall into enjoying artists that just do their own thing that's specifically its own. Nobody else sounds like it, because as an artist, I go to shows and hear a bunch of other artists. I hear my own music, listen to the radio, everything in between. And you start to hear the same thing after a while. So what's special for me is hearing a different sound, just something fresh to my ears. So my taste is all over the place. I'll get in the car and I'll put on Luke Combs. I love Luke Combs, even though I don't love country music. He's super talented. But I mean, anything from that to Juice WRLD to Jesse McCartney or Beyonce, it's just everything in between, really. But in terms of my music, I think it's influenced by mainly hip hop naturally, whether it be Eminem, Lil Wayne. I like Jadakiss and Ghostface, even though they're before my generation. Those are my favorite old head rappers to listen to, you know. But yeah, and I don't know that I compare my sound to any person in particular. A lot of people ask me, you know, who do you sound like? Or if you wanted people to listen to you, what bigger artist would you compare yourself to? And I have not found the one yet. I mean, I think there's one of the artists from Flatbush Zombies. He's got like a really low, growly kind of voice. And I feel like I kind of sound like him, but even then the music doesn't quite match it. So maybe it's a good thing that I haven't found the person that I sound like yet.
Maybe it just means because you're laying down something that's never been laid down before.
Which if I am, I'm entirely happy with, because that's what I like to hear. Then maybe I'm reproducing it at some point in my own way. Yeah.
I mean, it's a catch-22 because it's like, you know, you want to say like you like grunge artists, like, you know, you may compare like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains being grunge music that you all enjoy, but they don't all sound the same. So, right. You know, but then you don't want to say I sound like them either. That's not what I'm saying.
Right. You know, because you don't want to be too much like them. But you also don't want to be too original to where you can't be compared, which is kind of what I'm falling into. I can't tell people like, hey, you like listening to Lil Wayne, listen to me. Or, hey, you like listening to some like Papa Roach is another band that I like to listen to, where sometimes I feel like my music toys with that sound, but doesn't fully go there. So I'm sitting in this weird in-between space, you know?
Mm-hmm. I feel that, man.
Yeah.
So what sort of elements are important for you to have in your music to set your type of distinguished sound? Like any kind of techniques vocally or otherwise?
I think it changes a lot. It's hard to nail down one, but I think the most consistent thing is just something that's going to evoke emotion, you know, whether it's sometimes it's heavy bass and 808s if I'm going for a deep trap rap kind of song, or lately I've been working on pop music where it's like I want something that you could hear on the radio one day, or that somebody's mom even might like listening to, as opposed to my rap music, you know. But I think it's all really emotion driven, because that's what got me into the music in the first place, was hearing a really good rap song and being like, man, I feel like I could go be that guy and rap that way. Or hearing, even if it's a goofy love song, and saying, yeah, we've all been there. We've all felt that before. So it's like my common goal is just to bring emotion to it. If it's a sad song, I want to make it sad, even if it hurts people a little bit. But whether people admit it or not, they like the emotion, whether it's sad, happy, angry. The emotion plays the biggest part in the music, and that's always been huge for me. And it's not like any one type of beat or one type of sound. It comes in a lot of forms for me. But I think that's the best way to describe that for me. Nothing's very consistent. If you play my music from 3 years ago, it obviously sounds nothing the same as today. None of the beats sound the same. It's all over the place, really.
So would you say that you use specific vernaculars for invoking specific kind of emotions, you know, like we know about, like, you know, when someone's angry, they yell, or when someone's sad, they speak more soft, in that kind of instance?
I've never got into the yelling, funny enough. I've thought about making songs where I actually yell at the microphone, kind of like a Ski Mask the Slump God screaming in his mic thing. Never got into that, but I have had songs recently where I sing a little bit, or I call it vocalizing, because I don't know if I'm fully singing yet, but I think it's a little more vocal than the rapping. But depending on the message I'm giving, the music I used to make was more trap heavy back whenever I was in the group. So I was almost growling while I was rapping. I'm rapping the lyrics and it's like, like really getting into it. But definitely changes with the song. If I want to make a happy song, I don't want to growl at people. So I like to lighten it up a little bit. Imagine I'm making music for a family to hear, that the whole family can sit in a car and listen to, a lot more approachable. I don't want to be like the big burly dude that's growling through their speakers. So I'd say that's the biggest thing that changes, although the voice still sounds the same, kind of just the amount of aggression I put with it.
No, I'm always impressed. And now, especially being an engineer, I listen more closely, pay more attention to vocalists in particular about y'all's vernacular and the way that you can transform your voice from, this to that, not just in pitch, but, like literally almost change your voice to fit whatever narrative. It's really impressive.
Right, because a lot is based off the beat too, where if I'm kind of sitting behind the beat and just flowing with it, it's going to be more laid back, where I kind of I want them to mix together. But there's also other songs where I want my vocals above the beat and I want them to listen to what I'm saying as opposed to the way the beat sounds. And I think over the past years, when I started really getting into the actual like living in the studio with it, my last album I worked on, we spent it had to be at least 20 or 30 hours in the studio of just meticulous listening to the little things and just saying, I don't like that. I do like that. We went from me saying, you open up Pro Tools. We went from me saying, oh, that green part right there, that yellow part right there.
Yeah.
Like I used to identify it as take that green part and stretch it here or something. But now we're thinking, bring up this vocal track. Like I like to put 2 or 3 tracks behind it, especially on singing songs or pop songs, add a whole bunch of layers to it. And not the average listener hearing it, but it's important for me these days, where when I'm listening to the song, I just feel like it gives it more depth, more oomph. And actually being in the studio more did that, because for a long time, I didn't want to spend the money on studio. But at a certain point, you realize you got to up the game a little bit and take the craft to that level, which is when that changed on being very detail oriented. But it upped the music too. I mean, the music just has a whole different sound now than it used to because of that.
Oh, yeah. You notice a difference from $10 quality to $100 quality,
I mean, when I started, I was recording in one of my homies' closets. Like we're sitting in a tight, I'm a big dude and I'm standing in a closet that I barely fit in. Microphone hanging from the ceiling, and I'm like trying to keep the door shut so I can keep the sound in.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So we went from doing that, taking 3 hours to make one song, to now, go in the studio, much more comfortable, welcoming. Just everything has changed since that point.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I could make it for free in my house. But, if you listen to it, you're like, but then you have to take out all this. You got to take out all that before you can even start mixing. You have to repair it, because you don't want to pay for studio quality recording.
And I think even if I had so much equipment at home, even if I had a bunch of money, the equipment, all of it that I needed, I'd still have to go to somebody else and get their ears on it, get their touch on it, which is another important thing with my music, is having people hear it. Before I ever put it out, I'm sending it to at least 10 or 20 of my most opinionated people and saying, don't be a yes man. Do you think it's good? And just really listen to it.
Seriously. Yeah. Like, and a couple of times, because you'll listen to it once and you're like, oh, that sounds good. But you listen to it a couple times again and you're like, you notice more things and you're like, oh, whoa, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
And you also start to catch on to replay value too, which has been a big thing for me lately. Is I play the song a lot after I leave the studio. I almost flood my mind with it. And I want to hear, does it sound as good the 20th time I hear it as it did the first? Because I want somebody to listen to it every day. And if I can't listen to it every day, then I don't want to expect that other people will.
Right. So you released released an EP called Spartan, as well as a full-length album, like a beast album, Space City Dreams, man. Like 18 tracks is on that sucker. Good gravy, Miss Mary. So can you tell us a little bit about those projects?
Well, Spartan was really just the first compilation of my solo work. So as a group that I was part of, we had released another tape way back when, and Spartan was my first project that I did by myself, trying to figure out what my sound was. And that sound was a lot different than the sound is now. But I will say, listening back to that one, what you get is the real underground feel. I mean, whole thing recorded in a closet. I didn't know what I was doing with my music yet, or I didn't know what direction I was heading in. It was just, let's put out a few different sounds and see if it catches. A couple of them hit. I liked a couple of them a lot. There's a couple that I listen back to and I don't love, but people still enjoy. But that was kind of the precursor to everything else. And Space City Dreamin' was a 2-year-long process, really. Wow. So with that, I had released, let me see, Just Joshin' was a single before the album came out. And there was also a song on there named 3, which there's a whole story with that. There was an original song called 2 that I made with one other guy when it was me and him being a duo. And then we turned into the 3-person group and made the song called 3, which was the sequel to that. And then after the group broke up, I made my own version of it. That is the 3 that we have now on that album, which feels kind of fine-tuned in myself on it. Mm. But I didn't plan on making an album before I made it. I just realized at one point I had about 8 songs that were sitting there that I hadn't done anything with. And I said, well, man, we're entering like the amount of songs you want to have to do a project. And at that point, I had so many songs written, because I always have at least 10 songs written that I haven't recorded yet. But I had so many written that I said, man, if I can just get in the studio and, grab the money together and really throw it into that, I think I could have a whole project. So I wrote all the songs out and I went to Juice at AV and said, hey, I need you for a whole day, like time as you'll give me. And I think we sat there for probably 10 hours that day, just going crazy. And I thought surely 10 hours would be enough, because I've never had a studio session that long. That was not long enough. I went for 10 hours and we recorded about a handful of the songs, and then had another day-long session and then another after that. But along the process of doing that, I said, hey, why don't we just throw this all together into a project? Because nobody's making projects like that, especially on an underground local level. There's this trend lately towards make 2-minute songs. And when you put out a project, put out like 8 to 10 songs, and the entire tape is 20 minutes long. And I was like, I don't care if people listen to the hour-long project, which it is almost an hour long, and it's a lot to listen to. But I feel like the people that do actually give it the chance and listen to all of it, it's a whole journey, really. You start at the front and you don't know what to expect. First song's really cool, but through it, you find so many different vibes and sounds within it that it's not even like it's telling a story. It's not a Kendrick Lamar, let me talk about injustice and whatnot. I don't tackle any of that. It's just a lot of feel-good music, a couple sad songs sprinkled in for sad boy emotions, But that's the best body of work I have to this point. And I haven't came up with a better idea since then. I think I'm edging towards it, and I'm finally starting to try and throw together my next project, which is entirely different. I feel like I've tackled the rap hip hop space, and I'm really good with that now, but I want to keep challenging myself to do more and kind of figure out what I can do that other people aren't doing, which currently is a cool pop punk kind of sound that does not exist in Houston at the moment. If it exists, I haven't found it. Like a rapper just up there doing whatever feels cool instead of just trying to be the next cool rapper out of the bunch that there are in the city,
Right. And so Real quick shout out to Juice at AV Recording Studios.
That's
He's
my
the
man. I will die on that hill. Anybody comes to me for recording, I say, you got to go to AV and talk to one of those dudes. But Juice has been my guy past year or two, probably.
That's the man right there. All right. And you can follow.
That is a hard-working dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you kind of spoke a little bit about this already, but what kind of things, if any, have you learned from producing and work on the production of your first EP, Spartan, and then your full-length album, Space City Dreams?
The biggest thing I learned is just taking your time. And so when I first started, if I recorded anything, I just wanted to put it out immediately. I wanted it to, like, kind of whenever you came home from school and, like, you got a star on your paper or something, you're like, look at this, this is great, I did this, which I felt a lot with the music at first. I just wanted the gratification of being like, look, I did this really cool thing, here it is. Which now has transitioned into taking as much time as I can with it and kind of letting it sit with me for a bit, you know, and I just want to make sure it's that good. I guess I'm becoming a perfectionist with it, because once you start to put more money and time into it, you realize I've put a lot behind this, and I just want kind of the end result to match all the work that went into it. And I feel that I still don't know much about the production. There's still times where I'm just saying it like, can you make that louder? Can you give me some wee-woos or crank up the auto-tune, you know? Which I'm a culprit of. I use auto-tune. I'm not afraid to admit it. It has a nice way of enhancing things. Whoever said auto-tune was bad is wrong. But, I mean, I haven't fine-tuned the production side of things. I still have to have an engineer do 99% of the work, because that's another thing I believe in, is that the engineers do not get enough credit. I think people look at an artist and say, oh, that artist is dope. He's doing amazing things all by himself, but there's so much other stuff that goes into that. So I think that's the biggest thing I learned from starting to where I am now, is that you have to have good people behind you, and the production is 90% of the battle. Whenever I go listen to music now, it's like, you know, how clean does it sound? How different does it sound? Because anyone can get on a mic and spit bars. I mean, anybody does it, but it's what makes it different. And I think the production is usually what gives the leg up on that.
100%. You know what I'm saying? Like you said it yourself, and that's something that I tell people all the time. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, you know, the artist shouldn't have to stress about if the stage is going to be nice or if the production is going to come out right. They should just be able to be creative and express themselves, because y'all are sharing your deepest emotions with us strangers. You know what I'm saying? Just coming out and spilling it. The least we can do is be competent live and studio engineers. You know what I'm saying? Just be understanding and real.
The live one is the tough one. I've never had problems in studios, but what I have seen a lot of is going to a show, and you have to be ready for any and every hiccup to happen at a show in the moment. My last show I did, I'm not upset about it. I understand that things happen with the business, but I mean, I was scheduled to do, it was a 20, 25 minute set. Technical difficulties happen, and I only get a 7 or 8 minute set out of it, and half of it I'm rapping a cappella. I don't even have music behind me, nothing spinning. But, you know, did the absolute most I could with it. Somebody in the crowd shouted out, hey, just rap it, do it a cappella. And I was so mad I was going to walk off stage. But then I thought, man, if they want to hear it, let them hear it. So improvised and turned into one of the coolest things I've ever seen, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Live is a beast, you know what I'm saying? But the main thing is do your best, you know what I'm saying, under the circumstance. And that's what you did, and you made it work. So that's what's most important.
Yes. And the biggest advice for live shows is don't forget your words. people think you know your words the best. And I will tell you, there are songs I performed for 4 years and I still forget lyrics too.
Very much so. And do you have similar rehearsal techniques for studio sessions and live sound, or are they a little bit different?
I've never been too official with the rehearsal of things. I've always been very in the moment. So for shows, rehearsing for that, truthfully, I know some people actually pay for space and they'll go to a studio and actually have like a whole audio setup. Me, I am a fan of sitting in my room and turning on a loudspeaker and just running around my room like a madman and just rapping like there's 100 people in front of me, jumping around thinking, where can I get my breaks in between lyrics and whatnot? Where can I have somebody else ad lib for me, or where can I put emphasis? Where do I think the crowd can go well with this? That's my biggest show rehearsing. But in terms of studio rehearsing, it's a lot of just scrolling through beats. I use BeatStars. I don't want to give them free promotion, but I use BeatStars, and I just look through and it depends on what day I'm looking at it. There's some days where I'm listening for a really bass heavy rap beat and I just want to throw a whole bunch of bars on it. There's other times I'm looking for a cool punk sound. And I really just find something that sounds cool. And if I like the beat enough, I will find something to put on it. I've had a lot of songs. Whiplash being my newest single I put out, where I really just heard the beat and thought, this is a cool beat. I searched up like catchy Jack Harlow beats or something, and that's the beat it spit out for me. I wrote the hook for it in all of 2 minutes. And once you have a hook, you have half the battle. The hook was written in 2 minutes, and both verses took about 10 minutes to write. So the biggest chunk of that song was 20 minutes of just hearing a cool beat and going into it. And I've always understood that studio time is really important. So I rehearse it myself as much as I can, sitting on the phone, got my lyrics up, beat on the laptop, just rap it a few times. And once it sounds good to me, I'm like, okay, let's go to the studio with it. Now we have a starting point to run with.
Nice, man. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is to talk about your latest single. There's Whiplash and also Two-Time Champ that you released last year. And
Whiplash.
were those...
What were you going to say? Sorry.
No, you're good. Did you record those at AV Studios as well?
Yes, both of those were recorded with Juice. Whiplash has kind of been like my baby recently because I accidentally wrote it in 20 minutes. And funny enough, out of all the songs I've made, it's gotten the best feedback from people, which was crazy to me because I feel like I didn't try. And maybe it taught me the lesson of you don't have to overwork and over try with these things. Because I've always wondered, like, what is the science behind making a hit? The people that make hits that go on the radio, what did they do differently? Who did they know? What put their song on the radio that won't put my song on the radio? And Whiplash was just a really funny story of accidentally making a really cool song. And I think it still has a long way to go. I mean, there's obviously not a lot of people have heard it. It's still under 1,000 plays on Spotify, but hoping it'll be the first one that cracks over 1,000. I think it will once I really start pushing it with people. Gotta hope and believe in that one, you know. And Two-Time Champ, actually, it was another one that really just started with a catchy hook. I was kind of just sitting there, heard a beat, wrote a hook really fast, and then threw the verses in, which has really been the process for making all the songs, is start with a hook. If I can figure out a hook, I've already won half the battle on my songwriting end of things. And both of those were just really feel-good songs. There wasn't any not feeling like I needed to prove anything. I mean, Two-Time Champ kind of was a show-off song. The general theme of that is just rapping, you know, kind of hyping myself up, just talking myself up a little bit. But Whiplash was more of a just feel good. You know, if you heard that in the club, people would start dancing to it. People would love it. It just kind of fits that club vibe, turn up wherever you're going at. And that's kind of the phase I had been in for a while here, where now I'm moving into some pop music. I want to start making some sad boy music, you know, kind of evoking that emotion. But I'd say for the past year, it was really all about just really hype music, stuff that's going to sound really good at a concert. And just because I'm about to start going into a run of doing a lot more live shows, and having songs like that makes it a lot easier for crowd interaction, catchy hooks that kind of burns into people's brain. They can remember it. Hopefully one day they can rap it back to me and I'll have one of those, coming of age moments one day.
Yes, man. And so far you've performed at BFE Rock Club and places like Scout Bar. So how are these shows so far? Like, what were those venues like, especially?
So the one I'm most familiar with is BFE because I've done countless shows with BFE. I think just there I've opened for Paul Wall, Slim Thug, Zero. I mean, you name it, all these Houston legends that, we've just been there. It's always the same. I mean, I know the bartender's name, like Ryan, the bartender, super dope guy. They're sound people. It just feels like home when I walk in there, funny enough, because I remember my first time going there, I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on. There were a ton of people in the building, but over the years, it's became like home. And then I've also performed at what's called, I think it's 18th Street Pier. It's a venue down on the south side by the water. It's literally on the beach, actually. It's really cool. They got a nice little boardwalk patio out back. We've done crazy shows there. We opened there for Lil Flip one time. We were jumping on top of tables, rapping to people. Workers had to tell us to get off. It was pretty great, though. But we've done shows there. I mean, Scout Bar, I have to give Scout Bar their flowers because as a performer, that's been certainly my favorite place without a doubt to perform at in terms of how professional it is, I mean, we've done local shows there where there were no headliners. It was all just local artists. And they'll have 100 people in the building, which you don't see everywhere you go because it's a venue that people like to go to. You've got a beautiful stage, light system. They've got 2 bars, not 1 bar, but 2 bars, which is extra great for people like me, Long line at the other one, go to the other one. I love Scout Bar. I love the promoters there. They're all really great to work with. And I've also performed at some smaller places. I've performed at a couple small hookah spots. There was Acadia that I performed at way back when. Another really nice venue that I just haven't touched in a while. But yeah, BFE and Scout Bar gets my biggest recommendations. Workers, promoters, all of it being really great. First show happened because of Big Yogi. Big Yogi's a really good friend of mine. He actually put me on my first show at BFE, and that's where live performances took off from.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And, and working at these venues, is that how you met some of the artists that you have performed with before, or did y'all collaborate on other projects before performing live?
Well, it really all started with my first show at BFE. So, I mean, the guys that I used to be in a group with, they knew a couple people that I've hopped on songs with a couple other people, songs that just never came out there for fun. But in terms of the things that I've really pushed, it started with one show that I did at BFE where I did that show. I met a few artists and realized there's a whole network for this thing where before my first show, I didn't even know how I was going to do a show. We actually hadn't even performed a song yet. I just woke up one day and said, I want to do rap music. And I told one of the bartenders that I was working with at a place back then, he says, oh, I know a guy that hosts rap shows. And that's how he gets me in connection with Big Yogi. And he says, okay, yeah, cool. I'll put you on. Just go ahead and email me your music and I'll give it to the DJ. And I'm like, we don't even have music yet at this point. We don't even have a single song under our belt. So we rush to get a song done, get to the show and do it. And, you meet a few people that way. And I've met people like Nikki Danger, CJ the Gov is another big one. People just have all kinds of connections just from being there, where you meet promoters. I mean, I've met people from Exotic Pop that do brand deals with that. Nikki Danger is the biggest one I met from Big Yogi. We did a competition together, which is crazy for me. I see Nikki on a different level than me because he promotes his own shows. He has his own entertainment label he has so much stuff going on. And so when I first met him, I saw him on this high level, seeing that he's promoting at a whole different venue, but he's here competing for the same thing I'm competing for, but it showed me how to be hungry. So I meet him, and then I go to a show at Scout Bar with Nikki opening for Riff Raff. And that was a monster of a show. I met like a whole bunch of new people that followed me, made a whole bunch of connections from it. But it's been crazy just being at shows. You meet people for things without even trying to. And I mean, I'm kind of weird socially. Like I show up to venues and I got my eye on the prize. I'm like, let me get a drink and just go sit somewhere in the corner until it's time to do my thing. And then, I do my thing and people are like, oh my God, that was really cool. They want to talk afterwards, which was weird to me for the first few times. So to me, it's like, man, I wasn't even trying to meet people and I could meet people. It taught me a lesson. Hey, if you actually try to meet people, it is that easy. Just going there and being there, meeting a ton of new people that way.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's incredible, man. Like the way that you got to do it, you really just got to go out to the right places and just mingle, like get outside your comfort zone.
I mean, even if it's like a $5 entry show, if it's just locals and you pay $5 and get in the door, there's no telling who you meet. I mean, the guy that puts on Tune Out Cancer Fest, his name's Kevin Hamlin. I mean, I did a local show recently. He puts on a whole festival in Katy to kind of raise money towards cancer. And he gets big artists to go do that. I did a show the other day where it was $5 entry and he was there. Like for an artist that doesn't know him or know any of those people, that's a whole nother avenue that you could have found just by being there.
Indeed, man. Yeah, like, I mean, definitely going to local shows, guys. Y'all need to go out, not only just support your people, but yeah, you never know who you're going to run into.
Oh, yeah. You might see some crazy stuff. Who knows? Maybe Paul Wall will show up. These people are still in the city. You'd be amazed.
Yeah, I knew somebody that told me he would see Paul Wall shopping at Target all the time. And I was like, that's the most random thing ever. But
the most Houston thing ever is what it is. Yeah. I mean, in Houston, you could go anywhere. I mean, you could be over there like off Bissonnette and you might see one of the most famous rappers that's ever been in Houston. It's just that kind of mix in Houston, really. It's just one of those things.
Oh my God, that's so funny. And so what kind of venues, you said you were interested in doing a lot more shows this year. So what venues are you interested in pursuing, or any other cities outside of Houston anyways?
It's definitely an outside of Houston at this point.
Okay.
I want to see, what do other places look like? Austin is the first one. Mm-hmm. I've avoided South by at all costs because as an artist, South by is a tricky situation. Mm-hmm. You have official South by, which is super expensive to get into. If you get onto it, it's great and there's a bunch of people there. But then you have a lot of other venues, other bars and such that are selling slots, but then you don't know. Some of them advertise like, oh, one of them tried to get me on and say, we're going to have Migos and Cardi B at the show. If you're at the show, you're going to be opening for Migos and Cardi B. And then turns out the show did not even exist. So for a while, I have avoided South by just not even knowing what I would get into. But Austin, the city, is beautiful. I love the city, the music behind it, the love that they show is on a whole nother level. So Austin is the next target for me to go take over. Outside of the state, though, really just places that we like traveling. I just want to, instead of just traveling there for vacation, if we love going there so much, I want to say, hey, let me just go around, hand out some cards, find a venue, see what's going on. So those places like Denver is one of our favorite cities. Vegas, which I don't know how Vegas would go because we just go there to party and have fun. Maybe we can make it a worthwhile trip. I know it's basic, but New York and LA are always on the map because we've been in New York and I fell in love with New York. I've never been to LA though. I've never been to California at all, but it seems like a really accepting culture, a whole bunch of people to get the music out to. I mean, I could walk through Hollywood and just hand out flyers, hand out tapes, music, something, and I guarantee something will come out of it. So one day I have to make the trip to California and maybe I'll even just tour the whole state and say, hey, hit all these cities and just find out what sticks, you know?
I mean, why not? Everybody likes music.
Well, yeah. And I mean, some people put out music. A lot of the most famous artists from Houston did not get famous in Houston. It's a tricky thing to navigate because you have 1,000 rappers that think they're going to be the next rapper out of Houston. But if you look at people like Travis Scott, Meg Thee Stallion, Beyonce, all people who left the city and really figured out where their demographic was and just targeted it and then went after it, which I feel is kind of what you have to do now. And I mean, yeah. I know artists from Houston that have like 1,000 listeners from across the world. They've got people in Germany listening to it, which doesn't make sense to me. But if it works, it works. You find your audience somewhere, you know?
Exactly, man. The point is, just to not close any doors. Keep opening doors.
Yes, and don't burn the bridges for no reason. Also, I've learned that lesson of, you know what? Even if it frustrates you, just hold the peace because you never know. I say if it doesn't affect you, then write it out. Connections are everything within the music, truthfully. I mean, there's people that I thought, I met them 3 or 4 years ago, thought they would never be like where they are. I in my mind, just thought, okay, it's just another artist. And I see them 3 or 4 years later now. They're producing for big artists. They're doing videography. They're hosting big shows because they figured out how to make their own connections and just plant themselves into what works.
That's the secret, finding out what works.
And there is no written rule book. I've found that out. I've searched everywhere. I've met bigger artists and asked them, what do you do? Is there guidelines that I'm not following? How'd you get there? And it's always a different answer because I don't think there is any one given answer. I think if there was an answer, there would be a lot more famous artists. And if I ever find out, I'll share it. I'll let people know what the secret was.
That part. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Oh, it was absolutely my pleasure. Love getting to hang out, talk, share everything I can. I mean, I could probably go on for hours about everything, but new perspective is always important and wonderful.
For sure, man.
But, I appreciate you giving me the time, the platform. I am always very impressed by people who have their own operation. I mean, you have a wonderful podcast you started, going on. I saw how many has it been? Probably 50 or 60 at this point now. So
yeah,
hit the ground running and ran with it. And now you're AV. I'm going to be seeing you even more because you're over there and I live over there half the time,
Yeah. I definitely going to have to sit in and watch you and Juice in a session one time because that man's hands, I mean, well, it's not the hands, it's the brain. It's the whole thought process. His workflow is like, wow.
It blows my mind because he knows things that I don't before I can even takes half the work out of it. But
yeah,
people like y'all who just pave the way for other people to do what they're doing and assist others while doing your own thing. So want to give the flowers to you and say thank you for your platform and doing what you do.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I appreciate it, man. Do you have any last little bit of advice for the listeners?
I feel like we drop gems all in it. Don't burn your bridges, keep your connections. But I think the biggest thing I would like to say to fans, anyone watching, is to show support to your local people. I don't want to knock on big artists or big creators, but there are local artists. I mean, I have family on Facebook, family that I've known my whole life, friends that I've had 10 plus years that won't even just click buttons to share things or save things or listen to things. And it's so important and just so small that you could do it. So the biggest thing is like, just support the people around you. If they ask you to share something, it takes 5 seconds to click share and go on with your day, or just show that little amount of love. That's such a small deal for you and such a big deal for them. So just hang with your artists, support anyone that you can support in any way and turn it into love. That's my biggest thing. Just support the people around you in the best way you can.
It's not hard. No one's asking you to do physics, okay?
Show love, get love. Learned it at one of my first shows I did. I met a guy named Iceman. He's a DJ, and he said, show love, get love. That's been the biggest thing for me, Show love to people. The love is going to come back, and just put the love in the world. And one day the world will be beautiful and perfect if we let it be that way.
Facts.
Yes.
Facts. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this week, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Peace.